Thank you for joining us again on the Fishing Daily podcast. In this episode, I am joined by Hannah Fennell, who is the CEO Designate of Scottish Pelagic Fishermen's Association, current president of the Scottish Fishermen's Federation, and chair of the Women in Fisheries Network. Thank you for joining us. Here it is announced that you'll become the CEO Designate of the Scottish Pelagic Fishermen's Association. What has the past 5-6 months been like for you in the new role?
It's been really good. It's been a learning curve. So I come from a fisheries background. Prior to this, I was working for Orkney Fisheries Association. And while that's a very different fishery, there's still quite a lot of the challenges that I was facing there are similar to the ones in this role. So stuff about the science behind the fishery, the sustainability of the fishery, dealing with retailers, advocating for the sector, all that's really similar, even though the fleets are very different and the people and the governments you're working with are kind of different. But it's been a really good 6 months, actually. I've really enjoyed myself. Everyone's been really friendly, really helpful, and it's a really fascinating fishery to be in. So I'm really, really lucky in that respect.
And you've had to move from where you were to a new place to live. All these little adjustments that you have to make. How are you finding that?
I'm enjoying it, actually. So I lived for 10 years in Orkney, which was really lovely. But I ultimately wanted to move away from Orkney to be closer to my family, which is kind of based in Edinburgh and central Scotland. So the move's been really nice. I'm actually really enjoying living in Aberdeen. I'm back down by the beach. So we've been having a bit of a heat wave at the moment. So it's a bit like being in the Aberdeenshire Riviera. So it's been really good.
How's the association members welcomed having its first female CEO?
And yeah, they've all been really, really welcoming. I think they'd been welcoming whether I was a man or a woman, but they've been really helpful. I think I've spoken to everyone. It's been really good to get to know them and what they do and whereabouts they're based. So everyone's been really friendly and really, really welcoming.
For yourself, what do you see the future of the Scottish Pelagic Fishermen's Association and pelagic fishing in Scotland? What do you see the future like for it?
And I think we've got a really, really bright future. So already I think the sector it's really impressive. There's been a huge investment in the fleet, in the technology. It's cutting edge in terms of the science and how it's feeding into, for example, the icy stock assessments or collaborating with both other countries, other research organizations. It's got a really good supply chain, and the brand of Scottish pelagic fish is kind of known throughout the world as being really high quality. So I think we're in a really good place right now, and I think we can continue being in a good place in the future and kind of capitalize on all these advantages that we've got. We just need to make sure that we're getting the support that we need from the government to be able to continue to do that. So getting that security so people can continue making these good business decisions. That's what we need long term.
And the ISIS advice for this year, it was a huge cut that was recommended. Most countries went with decreasing their quota. How much an impact was that for the Scottish fishermen?
Yeah, it was a big impact. It's not been easy. I think the important thing that we need to realize is that ultimately we need to be able to come together to make sure that we're fishing the stock sustainably. And sometimes that's going to require difficult decisions to be made. And I think also when it comes to these ICES advice, we do have concerns about the science going in and the data going in, and sometimes the data gaps that are being incorporated into the stock assessment. So for things like mackerel, that's looking at the lack of knowledge around what the 2-year-old fish are doing. But we as an industry are looking at ways to fill those knowledge gaps so we're not into as many nasty shocks in the future.
And moving to your role as president of the Scottish Fishermen's Federation, what are the key policy and commercial challenges currently facing the industry in that area?
So I think the ones that have been most pressing at the moment, and I think people all over the fishing sector can agree with it, is the fuel prices and labour shortages as well. And these are kind of chronic issues that have been affecting the fleet not just the Scottish fleet, but fleets all over Europe, all over the world, really, for the last wee while. And they are big challenges to the industry. And there's no easy answers for either of them. We've been doing a lot as an industry, the Scottish Fishermen's Federation, to encourage young people to get into the industry. We've done a Pride in the Seas campaign, encouraging people to think differently about fishing. We're collaborating with Seafood Scotland, who are doing a lot of work with young people in schools about the importance of the fishing sector. We're always looking at new ways to try and attract people and draw people in. But it's still difficult.
Key issues for a lot of the Scottish fishermen at the moment is the issue of the spatial squeeze. We're looking at competition in Scottish waters from offshore wind, marine protected areas, and then the displacement coming from EU countries. Their boats coming into the Scottish waters. Is that a major concern for the industry in Scotland?
Yeah, I would say it's a huge concern, especially with developments around like offshore wind. In some cases, the industry is going to essentially end up paying twice. So we'll be paying by the loss of fishing grounds, but also then the impacts these developments are going to have on our stocks. And we've got concerned about how the EMF associated with the cables of offshore wind is going to affect the behavior of, for example, drowned crab and lobster. We've got concerns really about how offshore wind developments have been built on scallop grounds, affecting the scallop populations there. So it's the huge impact on the sector, not just the loss of fishing grounds, not just the consolidating effort in smaller and smaller areas, but then that wider impact they're having on the ecosystems that we as an industry depend on.
You hear a lot of information coming up that says, well, fishermen will be able to fish in between the wind turbines. And then you hear other information that, no, this won't happen because there's too much of a security risk for the boats to operate. Where do you think the truth lies in that?
Yeah, I think it's really important for developers to be really clear that, they might be saying fishermen can fish in these developments. And while that technically might be true, they also need to be realistic that people aren't going to want to fish somewhere that endangers their lives. Fishing's already a really dangerous occupation. Fishing in marine farms is even more dangerous. And developers really need to be open and transparent about that. So, for example, when they're doing their economic impact assessments, they need to be upfront with the fact that effectively these grounds are being lost.
Looking at the effects really protected areas could also have on the spatial squeeze. Some years ago, there was the issue that the SNP and the Greens were trying to bring in all these different areas. Where are we with that now? Where's the conversation between the industry and the government at the moment?
So the highly protected marine areas idea has been thankfully scrapped. Where we are now is kind of back where we were before, which is looking at the introduction of inshore marine protected areas. The offshore ones have been designated. Scottish Fishermen's Federation, we as an industry, we're all really aware that we rely on healthy seas to be able to thrive. And Scottish Fishermen's Federation really believes in that. We really signed up to that idea. And we have in principle supported the development of the inshore MPAs for quite a few years. But what we want to be really clear about is the inshore MPAs have to be proportionate. They have to be sensible. So where there's a feature that needs to be protected, we can't have just a blanket ban on all types of fishing. We need to understand exactly where the features that need to be protected are, exactly what type of fishing is saying impact it, and then have appropriate proportional measures to be able to protect those features. So what we're really against is just blanket bans that are not actually doing what they should do in terms of protecting the features, but are more about punishing the fishing industry. So we've been told that the inshore NPAs are meant to be maybe being consulted on later this year. That remains to be seen. But they're just, as long as they're proportional, we will consider them.
We often see that consultations are open to the public, and a lot of the time the people who do not really understand the fishing industry have their idea of what should happen in these areas. Is it important that the government listens to the fishing industry over the public, and in that sense where, they're interests are more prevalent.
Yeah, definitely. I think the government needs to be really clear on the difference between a stakeholder and an opinion holder. The government needs to be listening to experts, and that includes the fishing industry because we know the sea best. So yeah, we do need to be really mindful of that.
Moving on to your other role now is with you're working in UK Women in Fisheries. How is the organisation progressing?
It's going from strength to strength. It's really exciting. So we've got a full-time chief exec now, and we've got a comms officer as well, and they're both doing excellent work. We've expanded the network to over 300 members. We've done a collaboration with Fishing into the Future, which was a 2-year event bringing women from all around the UK to London where they could learn from each other and learn about fisheries management and share experiences. And that was really, really heartwarming to see. And people got a lot out of it, which was fantastic. So the network's growing. It's got a really high profile, which is fantastic. And yeah, I would encourage anyone listening to this to sign up.
What background do you have to get involved in it?
So it's open to any woman who works in fishing, and it doesn't have to be paid work. It can be if your spouse or your partner is a fisherman and you help them out, whether that's helping out with kind of doing the books or just helping out by giving that emotional support. So it's for anyone that has that connection to the fishing industry, and it doesn't matter whether you're in a role like mine or you're working at sea, or as I say, whether it's a familial connection, it's open for you.
The fishing industry itself, what can it do better in order to get more women involved?
And that's a really good question. I think just being open and helping women where you can. There's a lot of young women who are really interested in careers in the fishing sector. UK Women Fisheries, in connection with the Coral training, they ran a all-women sea survival, and I think they're doing the second one shortly, and that was fully subscribed. So there's a lot of demand for women who want to work at sea and on vessels. It's making sure that they have the opportunity to do so.
And for vessel owners who would like to get involved, how do they go about it?
Yeah. Well, if they want to get in touch, we can help chat to them about what they might need to do, whether that's just making sure that they've got maybe the right facilities on board, or whether that's just making sure that we can help advertise if they're looking for crew, we can help advertise in our network. We're looking at creating kind of a code of conduct or best practice guide for fishing vessels who want to be supporters of the network, and that should be launched within the next few months.
And looking towards the future with the network, once your hopes that will achieve, say, over the next 5 years?
Yeah, well, we'd love to expand the network further, and we'd like to be able to do more in-person events where women bring them together, and we'd like to do a lot of training exercises for them as well, because we often hear women say that they'd like to have more opportunities to expand their skill set. So, for example, particularly when we have women who are kind of their spouses are fishermen, their partners are fishermen, they're doing a lot of the shoreside admin, and a lot of them aren't maybe formally trained in that. So, getting someone in to train them actually better ways to do things, make them feel a bit more confident. We're really looking into doing things around that.
Well, we're looking forward to seeing what happens with it and as it progresses, because it's a great initiative, and it's something really that has to thrive, because, as you say, it's just not women that's on board. So that's everything else that's happening in the background.
I mean, you're totally right. We keep talking about this labour shortage in the fishing industry, and at the same time, 50% of the population is made up of women, but we've only got a small handful of them actually working on boats at the moment throughout the UK. So if you can attract more women into the sector, that can only be a good thing.
It can only be a good thing, yeah. So we'll move on now to Brexit. 10 years since the vote, and it's probably around 5 years since the Brexit itself happened. And it's really in the past 5 years that the damage has been done.
Yeah.
Last year there was the new agreement between EU and UK, which will last until 2038. How much damage has that done to the fishing industry in Scotland?
It certainly hasn't delivered everything that we wanted Brexit to deliver. So there has been a lot of disappointment about that. I mean, going forward, they're still hammering out the finer details of the SPS agreement and what that means. And there are concerns that we could potentially be dragged back to the CFP by the back door, as it were. So yeah, it has been, for some people, a big disappointment.
And the trust in the government, is there trust there within the members of the Scottish fishing industry that the Labour government's going to deliver a better outcome than what the Conservative government delivered for the fishermen?
I mean, we're going to be promoting any government to always do their best by the fishing sector, because it should be one of their main, core priorities. How much the government can do because they tied themselves to, these past agreements remains to be seen, but we're certainly constantly pushing for them to do better, for them to not drag us back to the CFP, and for them to not sell out fishing for the sake of another industry or another sector.
And where do you think that the government could improve these agreements rather than going backwards?
And I think they need to be really, really clear on the fishing opportunities for the fleets. They need to be really clear on kind of the trade aspects of things as well. They need to be really, really clear, making sure that fishermen get the opportunities and access, and that we're looking long term into the future, and we're not just looking short term for one industry and making fishing pay the price.
One of the big issues that helped the seafood sector in Scotland at the time of the Gin Corporation Agreement was the closed borders, where you had to put your fish through veterinary checks and customs. Are there any improvements in that?
So yeah, when this first happened, it was back when I was working with Orkney Fisheries Association, and that really did hit our sector hard because we were mainly kind of shellfish, live shellfish, a lot of it going to Europe. And the first wee while, once those checks had been introduced, was really devastating to our members, because it resulted in huge delays, real drops in catch quality, and a complete chaos, really. I think things have somewhat improved. We've definitely learned a lot of lessons since then, but there's still a huge burden on our processors, on the transport, on the hauliers. It's still really difficult to be competitive with markets who don't face those challenges. So yeah, there are definitely still challenges.
Since Brexit, there's been a lot of different challenges. There's been COVID and fuel shortages, the price increasing. What's it like at the moment for the boats price-wise? As the prices come down, or are they still okay?
I mean, the fuel prices, we feel they're still quite high. It's still challenging. It's for some parts of the fleet that is really acute and really, really painful. Others are maybe able to absorb it slightly more because of the prices they're getting for their catch. But it's still an uncomfortable place to be. And when fishing industry, as you just said, it's had so many knocks over the last few years that an increase in fuel price, maybe it was something that could be easily absorbed, 10 years ago, but today for some people, it's kind of the final straw.
And where do you think the government could come in and help?
Yeah, and that's really an interesting question. I think the government, we've had conversations with them. We've had conversations with our counterparts down in England, the FFO, about what the government can do to support it. And it's tricky. I think making sure those supplies are there, trying to make sure that fishermen have access to it, and also just trying to make sure that these other burdens and challenges the industry is facing are kind of decrease, so they can better absorb the shock of the fuel crisis.
Above that, couldn't people under pressure asking them what their vision is going to be for their job in the next few years? But where do you think Hannah Fennell will be able to use her experience and influences going forward?
And I'd really like to see the pelagic sector continue on its current trajectory. So we've got a lot of investment in the fleet. We've got some really good work being carried out by the SPFA in terms of its science and how it's feeding into different stock assessments and carrying out all these research projects. So I'd love to see that continue as well. I want to continue to see the pelagic sector really thriving in these foreign markets, but also domestically as well. I really want to see people eating more locally caught fish. I think that's really important, and we as a country are not making enough of that. So I'd really like to see a difference there.
Well, thank you for joining us today, Hannah. I'm sure we'll be hearing from you more in the future, because you've taken up a very important role, and we'd like to know more about how you're getting along.
Yeah, I'd like that too.
If you like this episode or any of our other episodes, please hit the subscribe button and show your support for independent news in the fishing industry. Thank you.